Go.
Hey guys, I'm David Byers and welcome to my channel. So we're going to start up another long process, another long video showing a bowl from start to finish. My goal with this website is to do these long videos about once every 2 weeks, and my target release date is going to be Monday mornings at 8 o'clock. I am a full-time teacher, so it takes me about a week and a half to make a bowl as it is, and with the editing and everything that has to come along with shooting the video, I know 2 weeks is going to be the absolute time limit that I'm going to be able to adhere to, and sometimes I'm sure that won't work either because, like I said, I am a full-time teacher. This is not my full-time job, but you know, it's pretty nice when you can love both of your jobs that you have. So anyway, with this bowl, we're taking some apple wood that has run through my kiln. It is nice and dry. I mean, I'm down to around 7% humidity, moisture content with this wood. Speaking of humidity, did I mention that I do live in Georgia? I'm in Clarksville, Georgia. Yes, we're in the summer. We're in July. I'm expecting another 90-degree temperature day today, and humidity outside, it's not measured by percentage, it's just measured by thickness. It's whatever you can cut the moisture content out of the air and walk through it. But anyway, let's get back to the wood. So with this apple, what I'm going to be doing is fitting it to the bucket, and you want to have a base piece that you're going to start with, so you need to think about along this base piece what unusual character that you're going to have. So I love it when I've got all these different branches coming out. Pieces like this will be removed. Rotted wood like this will be controlled. When I have openings like this makes for really nice character. So I need to think about how I'm going to mark this to fit it to the bucket. And then I have these other smaller pieces of branches with other smaller branches coming out of that I'm going to fit around that piece in the bucket to make it all fit intimately and create the most unique, interesting pattern that I can before we add the epoxy. I'm going to strip as much of the loose bark as I can with a wire wheel attached to a lathe, and then we will come back and we will add the epoxy. The apple wood is one of my favorites to use. It splits and it cracks and it has unusual color patterns to it. It's a really pretty wood. Wood turners many times don't like to use apple because it is going to split and crack when you dry it. So a normal wood turner has to really control the wood. They're going to paint the ends with anchor seal. They're going to remove the moisture content in their kiln or their drying process very slowly to prevent the wood from cracking. Since I'm adding epoxy, I don't have to meet those requirements, so I can just let it split and crack and let the epoxy fill in those spaces, adding more character. When we do add the epoxy, going along with the color of the wood, I'm already planning the colors that I'm going to use. I'm going to try to blend 3 different colors together. The main color is going to be enchanted green that I have not used with this apple wood before. And I'm going to blend in some diamond gold, trying to create some streaks of gold. And then I'm going to get a blend in with neon white also. It's a very opaque white, and I want to see what level of contrast that we can get with those. Let me mark these pieces, fit them to the bucket, and then I'll show you what I've come up with in just a little bit. Well, if I say so myself, this turned out better than I was expecting. So we're looking at this base piece of apple running through the middle and all these pieces attached on the outside. Used a hot melt glue gun to connect the pieces, and it fits the bucket. You notice how dirty the bucket is on the outside? You want it to be pristine clean on the inside. The outside doesn't matter, the inside does. And this fits intimately to the bucket. Even as so, that's going to take a lot of epoxy filling in those spaces. I'm going to pull this back out, and I might make you a little bit dizzy, but I want to give you a close-up zoom in view of what this piece looks like, because it's going to have all kinds of character. I think it's time to mix some epoxy. I take the pressure pot up to 50 psi. I muted this part because I filmed it at 10 times the speed and you did not want to hear the shrill screech. As I mentioned before, I'm going to try something new this time. We added 10.5 liters of epoxy with the enchanted green to this project. That's the most that I've ever added. I'm really worried it's going to have thermal cracking, but I told you I was going to add in white and gold also to kind of create a swirl mix. Well, if I've got thermal cracking, I don't have to worry about the gold because that's what I'm going to fill the cracks in with. But I'm going to try to use this syringe and the tube system to inject so I can get some of the color all the way down at the bottom as well. So let's give this a try and see how things work. First thing I'm going to do is release the pressure from the pressure pot. And we did have thermal cracking. It has already set. We are 14 hours later. Normally this takes 3 days. I could not keep it cool enough, so I'm gonna have to get this out of the bucket, look at it, and I'll show you what we've got. So this is what we've got. We have thermal cracks all in here, and I was certainly worried about that when we started because that was a lot of epoxy. But that's okay. Epoxy lets us make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, we're not pushing the envelope and we're not learning. So original colors that we had, we've got the enchanted green in there. We wanted to add neon white. That's not happening this time. And the diamond gold, we're going to add this. I'm just basically going to pour this in, see how it fills in the cracks. I mixed this yesterday. That's why I already had the gold and the white mixed, because I wanted it to be mixed at the same time that I did this original pour. So this would be setting up a little bit and would be a little bit more in a gel state instead of a liquid state when I pour it in. But I'm going to pour this in, let it seep into the cracks, fill them in as much as I possibly can, and we will see what happens. So let's pour it in and see. I know that as I'm pouring this in, it's not going to be able to access all the cracks. It can access what we have at the top, but cracks down towards the bottom, I will have to come back and repair those after we finish separating it from the bucket. It is pouring down in there. Once this gets its final set and I separate it from the bucket, we'll have another look and another determination of where we're going to go from here. That's the fun thing about playing with epoxy. When you start, you may have an idea, but you never know what you're going to get when you finish. So I decided to put it back into the vacuum chamber to see if pulling pressure on it would get the epoxy to flow down into the cracks better. As you can see, it is bubbling, so it's getting down in there. I'm going to pull it all the way up to somewhere between 25 to 30 pounds of pressure, and I'm not going to hold it there for long, but I want to get it until the bubbles pretty much stop so that we can fill in the cracks as much as possible. So I guess the lesson to learn here is when you don't think that you need to do video, you should still do video anyway, because I took the bucket out of the pressure pot and I went to separate it. When I separated, I turn it upside down and I just drop it so it hits the basement floor straight. And when I did, the bucket just shattered and pieces went everywhere. I mean, it went bluey. It was really impressive, and I wish I had shown that to you on video. So I'm gonna take this out and I'm gonna put it up on the table, and let's talk about what we've got now. Here we go. Let's talk about this green monster here. This thing weighs 32 pounds. This is a heavy block that we're gonna be attaching to my 14-inch benchtop lathe. So in the bucket, this was the bottom, this was the top. And you know, you can't let yourself get pigeonholed in your thought. When you assess, when you look at things, you take into account what it looks like, what you think you can create. sometimes you just have to change your mind. I was thinking, how cool would this be if I turned it sideways instead? But the problem with this is I want to keep as much bulk as I can, since I use 10.5 liters of epoxy, and connecting on the side, I would probably end up losing more epoxy out of the bulk of it that way. But when you place it in the bucket, the top self-levels. The bottom is still a little bit more rounded, so I'm thinking the bottom's going to make for a better top. And I'm going to use the top as the bottom. I'll cut this piece off. I'll use my angle grinder and I'll cut these down flat. And then I'll connect my waste block with the hot melt glue here on the bottom, connect it to the lathe, and turn it in such a way where I'm thinking my shape is probably going to be wide on the bottom and come up to some form of a fluted neck on the top. So can't wait to get this one on the lathe. Let's do it. And I guess I got so excited, I forgot to talk about the thermal cracking that we came and backfilled in with the gold. I did want to show you the gold filled in the cracks really nice on the top. I can see some areas where it picked it up, where the gold filled in on cracks coming in from the side. But I'm going to have to be really careful as I am turning this to make sure that none of these cracks are going to release, because the least thing that I want to have happen is a huge chunk of epoxy to fly off and hit me in the head. So this one's going to be more dangerous than some of them, but the possibilities are going to be really enormous. So let's get it on the lathe now, get it connected. It's going to be a lot of fun. One of the important things that we do as we are getting the block ready to turn on the lathe is we have to remove any projections. The projections are not going to turn as easy, and it's just going to be unsafe. It's going to want to grab the instrument. So you can see here I've used my lathe, moving the tailstock in towards the headstock, holding the piece in between so that I can use my saw and come back in and just cut away all these extra pieces. Steadying it like this just makes it easier to do so, and the lathe is the perfect way to make this happen. And also, I want to get the end of it really flat and smooth so that I can come back and I can attach my waste block with the hot melt glue. And we'll get to that point in just a little bit. So we use a little bit of air to blow things off so that we can see it nice and clean. We've got it relatively flat, and now the piece that I was using on the headstock to steady things in is actually the waste block that I'm going to connect to the bottom. So I want to make sure that it's got a good flat fit, and it's not quite there. So let's come back with the angle grinder, smooth it out just a little bit. It's not going to take much. And then the waste block will fit more intimately. You want to have a good tight fit. When you're gluing this together, it is hot melt glue that's holding this block that started out at 32 pounds. It'll be a little bit less than that now since we've been truing things in, but not a lot less. And we want to have a good, tight, intimate fit so that the glue will hold it nice and secure, so that things aren't going to come separated on the lathe when it is turning. And the glue itself is, it needs to heat well, it needs to seal well, and when done correctly, it works really, really good. I want to make sure that things are centered in, so I'm using my centering device here. I will use a drill bit in the very middle once I find the middle to hold things into position. And then I will check the width with the waste block. And I'll use another drill bit through one of the openings on the outer circumference of the waste block. And I will score that and mark that. And then I will come back after I have scored that and I will draw it in with a pen. So when I do come back with the glue attached to the waste block, then I can see that easier, and it's a closer circumference for me to be able to visualize when I'm placing the waste block to get it as close to the middle as possible as compared to just looking at the outer circumference of the entire block. That way I can just make for a better fit, so I don't have to true in as much after I get all this connected. Here you can see me using the pen, making the mark again, and that's just quick and simple, easy to do. And then the waste block will fit better within that circle that I've drawn. As you can see here, whole lot easier to see. So let's get our glue into the hot plate. One thing you need to remember with the glue is cheap, but glue is what's going to keep this safe on the lathe. So let it melt real good. Get it up to a high temperature, and then we just put the waste block inside the glue. Make sure that we've got plenty, and then we're just going to center it on top of this big block that we have. And it's not a complicated technique, but it's one that works really well. And I like doing this because it allows me to keep more height with the piece. I'm not having to cut an internal chuck to hold onto the lathe that's going to decrease the dimensions of my final piece. I want to have as much to work with as I can possibly get. Squeezing it in nice and tight, making sure we have a good intimate fit. And now we can attach it to the lathe after the glue has cooled down. That's already spinning pretty true. We're in business. So now just sit back for a little bit and you can watch as the outer dimensions of this piece begin to take shape. We are here with channel WRWD, and we can listen to the sounds of the lathe. It may not be quite the same as listening to the Eagles play some of their music, but we can still take it easy. I just can't make up my mind as I'm playing with this. At first I thought that this was going to be the top and this was going to be the bottom, and then I switched it around and I've gone back and forth, and I think I'm going to make this one the bottom again. But before I do that, I'm going to have some time to think on it, because I'm going to sit on this overnight. I'm going to pull in just a little bit closer with the camera in a minute, because I want you to look at the thermal cracking that's still in here. And I'm going to fill this in with some fast set epoxy. I'm going to let that sit overnight, and then tomorrow we'll make the final decision about what's going to be the top and what's going to be the bottom. Either way, I want to fill in these cracks with the fast set epoxy, because I don't want things to fly apart, and for two reasons. Number one, I don't want to get hurt. Number two, it's going to be absolutely fantastic when it does get finished. So let me grab the camera and pull in close, and I'll show you that, and then we will look at it again tomorrow morning. So here we're looking. You can see over here, this is some tear out from me just being too aggressive as I was shaping the outer edge. But here you can see where we have filled in previously with the gold colored epoxy. And you can see other areas like this where we have thermal cracking that has not filled in. So I'm going to need to come back and I'm going to need to repair each of these areas. And the more that I repair, once we finish it, is going to make it that much more spectacular. Look how deep that crack is. So got a little bit of touch-up work to do. And then, like I said, I'll see you again tomorrow. So here we are the next day. I have touched up all those areas of thermal cracking from the outside that I could see with some fast set epoxy with the gold pigment. They've closed in pretty good. I know that it's going to still be more towards the surface. The decision that I have made, this is going to be the top, and we're going to use this as the foot on the bottom, and we're going to shape it out and see where we get to. So we've got the outside dimensions roughed in. I'm going to connect a waste block on this side and flip it around. And I'm not going to waste your time with the video for connecting the waste block. That's just attaching it with glue. And then I'm going to turn it back around and then final true this in before I attach my steady rest. So when I come back, we'll be flipped around opposite direction. Well, I decided to show you anyway how I'm going to connect the waste block on this end. I like when I can do this using my tailstock to use pressure to really force it in. It creates a really nice intimate seal, and just thought you'd want to see it. And here I am final truing in the outside before we use the steady rest to hold things in position. We have to make it smooth. If it's not smooth, the inline skate wheels on the steady rest will generate heat, and heat is just not very kind with epoxy. So we want it to be smooth so we can prevent that from occurring. And now with the steady rest in place, we'll come back with our parting tool and we will remove the waste block from the top because it's no longer going to be necessary. So this is where we're at. We have flipped things around. So we've got bottom and top, and that's what we're going to stick with now. We've got the steady rest in place. So we are going to stop. This is going to conclude part 1 for the Big Green Monster. And we keep referring to this as the Big Green Monster, but that's not going to be its name. We're going to come up with something different as we get in here and we finish shaping things out. Speaking of shape, in part 2 of the video, I'm going to come along here and I'm going to, with this shoulder, I'm going to taper it a little bit more, create a little bit of a lip here on the top, and I am going to turn this into a hollow form. So in part 2, we're going to shape the top portion of this. We are going to get out my hollowing system, and I'm going to show you how I hollow pieces out, and then we will sand it and finish it and put the shiny on it and come up with the final name. You know, like we said earlier in this video, we have an original goal and we planned for it. If you remember, we started out and I was saying that I was going to blend in gold and white, and I had the epoxy already mixed for that. So it was more in a gel state, getting closer to a gel state as opposed to the liquid state that it begins in, but we couldn't do that. The yellow I used to fill in the thermal cracking, or the gold I used to fill in the thermal cracking. What did I do with the white? Well, the white, I filled up this container and had some scrap cedar lumber in it, some scrap cedar limbs. I did blend in a little bit of gold that I had left over just for a swirl effect, and I'll show you how I use this to make vases. So I do try to contingency plan. I never know when things are not going to go the way that I want it to. So it's good to not waste. And that's one thing that most every wood turner that I've talked to, they're good about not wasting materials. Always thinking about the next project and always having something on hand that you can follow into when you have something that shows up unexpectedly. So once again, I thank you guys for enjoying this video with me this week. And I do hope that you enjoy what I'm doing. I hope you like the stories that I'm trying to tell. With the festivals that I've been going to, that's one of the common questions that I routinely get from my customers is, what is this? I haven't seen this before. What you're doing looks unique at these festivals. How do you do this? And that's the purpose behind creating these videos, is how to. So I do hope that you will give me a like and subscribe to my channel. Those metrics certainly do help me to grow with what I'm trying to do. But more importantly, I hope you enjoy what we're trying to do, and I hope you get a chuckle or two along the way. So thank you again, and I'll see you next time for part 2 with the big green monster.